Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am Akihiko Tanaka, Chair of the U.S. Japan Research Institute, USJI. On behalf of the USJI and 5 founding universities, I would like to welcome all of you to the event 2 of the USJI Week, entitled Prospects for U.S. Japan Human and Cultural Exchange. As is all other events of USJI Week, this is part of the centennial celebration of the gift of the trees. I think we are very proud to be part of this celebration. This session was supported by U.S. Japan Council and U.S. Japan Conference on Cultural and Education Interchange, CALCON. Together with the morning events, event 2, entitled The Interaction of Young People in the U.S. and Japan, this session we hope to be connected to the an event commemorating the 50th anniversary of the U.S. Japan Conference on Cultural and Education Interchange, CALCON. That is the U.S. Japan Higher Education Panel to be held on April 9th in Tokyo. The U.S. Japan Research Institute is pleased to work closely with CALCON for the promotion of U.S. Japan cultural and educational exchange. Today, we are very much pleased and honored to have His Excellency Ambassador Ichiro Fujisaki as the keynote speaker to start our discussion in this panel. On behalf of the USJI, as well as 5 founding universities of the USJI, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to Ambassador for his continuing support and advice to our institute, as well as today's appearance as a keynote speaker. As a citizen of Japan, I would like to also express my personal thanks to Ambassador Fujisaki for representing Japan in our most important ally and partner, the United States, particularly during the time in the aftermath of March 11, when the Japanese people were struggling to recover and reconstruct. After Ambassador Fujisaki's keynote speech, we will have a panel discussion participated by Mr. Anthony Wilder Miller, U.S. Deputy Secretary of Education, and Mr. Thierry Ponte, Managing Director of J.C. Flowers and Company, and myself. Mr. Ponte is also the American chair of the CALCON. Unfortunately, Professor Theodore Bester of Harvard is not able to join us for an unavoidable circumstance. Today's discussion on human and cultural exchange is a wide scopic area, and I would like all the people on the floor to actively participate in our discussion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Ambassador Fujisaki.
Thank you very much, Professor Tanaka, and Secretary Miller, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for being here. I'm not going to make a keynote speech. It's just a sort of wigboat of what you are going to discuss. And but first of all, I'd like to express gratitude on behalf of all Japanese for what all Americans have done aftermath of earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear accident. Without your help, we would not have been able to recover. And it'll take some time, but we are on the recovery road. I was in Iwate Prefecture last year, visiting Rikuzen Takata and other cities like Morioka and met governor and mayor and discussed, and I asked American people what would be their message. I'm sorry, I asked them what would be your message to American people. They said, please convey thanks to them. Also, it'll take time, so please don't forget us. We like American people to buy our products, invest in us, visit us. It was these were their pleas, and I think it's my plea as well. Now I'm asked to talk about cultural and personal exchanges. It has been always said that young Japanese people are much more inward-looking than before, and not going out to the United States or to other countries. Now, the number shows that. But if you look at literature, 18th century, 19th century, or even go back to some time ago, always said that senior people have been saying that youngsters today are not as positive as when we were young, and I don't really think that they have changed that much as well. It's a, if I may say, bit of cliche to say that young people are not positive, outward looking. I think, in my view, I could say one or two things. One, from my point of view, I think younger people are a bit more honest to themselves and frank, maybe, than before, meaning what I or my generation used to be. This is a very humble example, but I have two daughters. They are grown-up women, now journalists in Japan, working like men. When they were here, when I was working as an embassy staff some 15 years ago, the elder girl was part of the varsity group, a volleyball group of her school. And she said during this game, they'll consume a lot of energy. So she wanted to bring onigiri, rice bowl, to her class, to the game. And she was eating that, and other girls, American girls, were interested in seeing her eating this black nori-clad rice bowl. And they said, can I try them? And they liked it. So my girl wanted to bring all the rice bowls to all the girls. And my wife was making 20 or 30 all the time, every time. And she said, I haven't had the chance to go, but she said, it's so funny that 10 or 15 girls are all biting into rice bowls, all the American girls, and here in Washington. So, and that really was astounding to me, because I was 50 years ago a junior high kid in this school, in this country, just for a year. But at that time, very frankly, it was unthinkable that I would take a rice bowl to my school. And it was really unthinkable that American boys would show interest in those things. So, very frankly, I was pretending that I was eating McDonald's for my baby food or anything. That's not true at all. But we had to be sort of seen as westernized at that time. And we had to be seen that we are only interested in Hollywood movies and American pops, not interested in Japanese things. That was sort of more a la mode at the time. Now I think people are a lot more honest in that sense. If They are not interested, they would not do that. They would not pretend as if they are so American or whatever. I think that's there. Maybe this is a very only one example, and I'm exaggerating a little too much, but just wanted you to know that the Japanese have really changed in that sense. Now, talking about younger people, I think they are honest in the sense that they would calculate and do what they are to their advantage. If they think that if it's advantage to their career building to come to America, they would do that. If they think it's not so easy to get degrees in this country, it's not that much respected in Japan, they will not try to do that. That's the very essence of, because they are very smart people, they are not dumb. They do what they think is good for them. And for thinking of that, I always think that let's try not to always talk about that younger people are not as ambitious, outgoing. What is needed is for us to prepare the ground for younger people. There are several things. One, if we want our Japanese kids to come to America, I think we have to greatly improve the English speaking or hearing or writing capability of Japanese. Because as you have heard, in some TOEFL or TOEIC exam, across the board, in Asia, Japan was second from bottom. I think Laos was the lowest, and even North Korea or China was higher than us in average. Isn't that true? And that's because maybe only North Korea, only the top 1% could take the exam, was allowed to take the exam, and if you fail, you're going to go to some whatever. So I don't know if that's the case, but in order to do so, I think we have JET program, where maybe some of you have been JETs. It's a very good program. We've been spending about $4 million, I don't know, around that estimate, and inviting in about 5,000 students from all over the world. These people will be teaching English for 2 years or so in Japan and go back. It has been one of the most successful projects. However, and after I came here, I've initiated a program saying, which is called JET Ambassador. That is that ask these young people to go to school, neighborhood school, and tell their experiences to American grade school, junior high kids. And I think it'll be very, very interesting for the kids to hear directly from fellow American citizens. So I've been promoting that. But what I have been promoting more is what I call reverse JET. That is to send grade school or middle school teachers, mainly, English language teachers, Japanese national, to United States. I've been saying this for several years. No one listened, saying that, oh, we don't have substitute for teachers, there are not too many candidates, who wants to come. But ex-Prime Minister, Mr. Khan, who's not the most popular politician, I hope this is off the record, listened to me and said, why don't we start that? And last year, we sent 100 teachers, 6 months, and we're going to continue that this year. It takes about 1% of the budget of JET program for the 100 teachers to come here 6 months. But if one teacher, she or he, goes back and teach class of 30, 5 classes for 30 years, she'll be teaching 5,000 students. What a great investment. If one improves, 5,000 will improve. So I would like to promote this project. It's not a zero-sum game with JET program. I'm not saying that we should decrease JET at all, because the problem with JET program is that when JETs go to Japan, a lot of Japanese national English language teachers have some psychological hindrance, because if an American teacher comes and speaks to students, students will know that this is totally different from what Japanese national teachers were saying, the pronunciation and everything. So I can understand the teachers do not want some of the American students to come around and speak. They'll be mocked sometimes by teachers. So this is exactly, I think, if we introduce this program of reverse JET and improve the language levels of teachers, then they will more embrace these JETs. So it's not zero-sum, it's a win-win situation. And I have received a lot of letters saying that, from teachers, that they have really, it was an eye-opener. And so I would like to promote this because, very frankly, it's very difficult for average Japanese to come to the United States and follow the school curriculum. They may pretend that they have done pretty well, but 99% have so much difficulty. You can't read that many books and so listen to what professor says. That I think first we have to start from English. Second, I was very much impressed with some of the ideas that was expressed by universities in Japan. Tokyo University here, with the leadership of Professor Tanaka, is changing the school year to start from September. And I think that's a great change, so that American kids come to Japan, Japanese kids can transfer to American colleges easily. And I think Waseda University also is trying to, under Professor Uchida, is thinking of introducing quarter system. And these new innovation is really important to internationalize Japanese school systems. So I really admire these leadership. I'm saying this not only because Professor Tanaka and Professor Uchida is here, maybe partly that, but really because I've been always saying that. Now, lastly, jobs, companies. I've been always saying to CEOs of big companies, don't grumble about young people's being inward-looking. It's your responsibility, sir. If your company opens up more for the foreign college graduates, and if not only as an interpreter, but put them in important posts in your company, these kids are smart, so they will try to go to foreign colleges. If they think that the big companies not opening their doors for foreign college people, they will not do that. So it depends on you as well. Now, for just cultural exchange, personal exchange, I have been thinking that our budget, government budget, other institutions' budget is decreasing. In this, and I don't think it'll increase for years to come. In this situation, I think we cannot continue a program to invite people just as we have been doing. We have to use a bit of what we call muscle between the ears and have new programs. For example, I think we should be thinking of issuing a coupon for college students that will subsidize airfare or accommodation. Not totally invite, but if you could have a $500 coupon, maybe that could be very good. And also for inviting established people, you don't have to invite them. You'll just make itineraries important for and help arrange meeting the important people in Japan, and then they will come at their own expense. And I think we have to do things a little bit more creatively. I think I don't know how we are partly responsible for these things, and we will continue to work on that. But let us not only to say that the generation has changed. Young people are not outward looking. They are too inward looking, and we haven't really seen a good positive move from young people. It's our responsibility, I think, to think of new things, and I will continue to work on this. But thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, and I'd like to continue our discussion. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Fujisaki, for a wonderful keynote speech introducing some of the important issues with these illustrious examples of the episodes and so forth. Now, I would like to start the panel discussion with Secretary Miller and Mr. Poltes. Before asking Secretary Miller to give his remarks, I would like to take advantage of my role as a moderator to say a few things about the current state of human and cultural exchanges between the United States and Japan. Well, I would like to talk about three things. One is the people's perception of the two countries. And I say that we should congratulate ourselves on the current level of mutual perception between the Japanese and the Americans. Overall, mutual perception is very good. The series of public opinion polls indicate that Japanese have high opinions of Americans. Americans have high opinions of Japanese. To cite only one example, the recent polls conducted by Yomiuri and Gallup last December indicated that 67% of Americans trust Japan, while 47% Japanese trust America. I think that's quite high. Well, the Japanese are somewhat more skeptical about Americans than Americans. But then, when it comes to the contribution made by the U.S. Japan Security Treaty, it's quite coincidence, I think, but exactly 71% of Americans and 71% of Japanese believe that the Security Treaty contributes to the peace and stability of the Asia Pacific. So I think the mutual perception is quite good, and I think at the foundation of this good mutual perception, there emerged, I think, on the second level is what I might call cultural interpenetration between the two peoples. As Ambassador Fujisaki talked about the episode of onigiri, probably I think it should, young people have become more honest, but then I think, you know, amongst the American young people, rice black balls nowadays may not appear as bonds. I think it's you know, edible things, and then something that are not so strange. And so that's the reason why they could get together quite nicely. I think many of things Japanese, many of things Americans are just ordinary to Japanese, but many of the things Japanese have become quite ordinary to many Americans nowadays. I think so. That's interpenetration of cultural affairs. The third thing that I would like to talk about is what Ambassador Fujisaki mentioned, is this the current level of exchanges amongst the younger people in the educational setting or science and technology research setting. I think this was discussed, I think, in the morning session too, but often the total number of Japanese students studying in the United States declined dramatically over the last 10 years or so. According to one statistics, I think this is made by Fulbright Commission, but in 1997 there were 47,000 Japanese students, while 2010 the number declined to 21,000 students, so less than one half the size. And then in comparison with this, the declining Japanese student numbers, the number of Chinese students is nearly 100,000, or the Indian students is somewhat similar range. We may think about how serious is this. There are some difficulties in counting the number of exchanges. Students sometimes stay one semester, 1 year, or sometimes 3 weeks. And how we should add up, that may create some problems. And I don't have any magic formula, but if we restrict those who are staying 1 semester or 1 year or longer, and looking at the students in the University of Tokyo and the 4 other universities representing the USJI, I calculated that currently 660 students from the 5 universities are staying in the US more than one semester. And from the University of Tokyo, 104 are now studying there. And then if I look at this number of students from Todai in the United States, over the last 10 years, the number was more or less constant, hasn't declined. So the decline appears to have occurred among many undergraduate level students who choose their undergraduate education as in the US rather than in Japan. And then they may currently shift their site of education, undergraduate education from the US back to Japan. And if we pay attention to those who are already in Todai or Waseda or Keio, those who are willing to come to the United States for an exchange and others, the number appears to be quite constant. Another indicator that I could share with you is the number of students experiencing academic activities much short terms. For example, in our university, last year, we sent about 3,400 students abroad by university funding. And then of this some 3,500, 1,000 came to the United States, either to attend academic association meetings or to engage in field works or short-term stay in the academic labs in American universities. I think 1,000 students willing to come to join experiences in American research and development fields and workshops is a quite significant number to indicate the willingness of the young students. And then again, this is in some sense consistent with the faculty exchange. Although the long-term faculty stay among faculty members are currently not many, but then with many overlaps, last year, amongst our faculty in the University of Tokyo, 9,000 went abroad, and 2,500 came to the United States. And so 1/3 of the faculty going abroad come to the United States. And that is quite consistent with nearly 1/3 of students going abroad for short term come to the United States. So in that sense, the general short-term exchange on research and exchanges are quite vigorous, despite this often quoted declining number of Japanese students. But then there are several challenges. I think we need to encourage more undergraduate students to try out in international scenes, including in the United States. And then also, we would like to have more American students on our campus. On the campuses of the 5 universities represented in the USJI, currently 323 students, American students, are studying. That's roughly half the number of students in the United States. In the case of our university, the University of Tokyo, 62 American students are now studying on our campus, as opposed to 104 studying in the United States. The 62 appears to be small, but in fact it is an improvement. In 1989, I digged up the old statistics, but in 1989 we had only 35 American students. Although 62 is rather small, but then it's twice as many as the number of American students 2 decades ago. But then in any case, another challenge is to encourage more American students to come to Japan. Unfortunately, immediately after the March 11th, there was some decline of American students studying in Japan. And so I think this is the year we need to promote more American students to come back. In some sense, in my understanding, challenges are twofold. The first, how to increase the number of undergraduate Japanese students having significant international experiences, including the coming to the United States. Second, how to increase American students coming to our campuses in Japan. We have taken several initiatives, we meaning universities in Japan. One was to increase the number of degree programs conducted only in English. Japanese language appears to be the barrier for those who may not have learned the language in high school and others. And so in our university's case, 17 graduate new programs were made that didn't require students to have Japanese language competence to enter. And then the students can get degrees without having to take courses offered in Japanese, all in English. And another initiative is something that Ambassador Fujisaki mentioned. It's a proposal of shifting the entire academic year from the current one, starting in April, to the one starting in September. This proposal was made by the working group of the University of Tokyo, commissioned by the president of the university. And the major motivation was that one of the obstacles to Japanese undergraduate students to have significant international experiences is the inconsistency of the Japanese academic calendar and those of the rest of the world. There may be some other obstacles, financial situations, or recruitment practices of the Japanese business. Those can be quite important, but inconsistency of academic year appears quite significant too. Ambassador Fujisaki appeared to imply that we have already made a decision. In fact, we haven't. The University of Tokyo has not made a final decision yet. The working is now preparing its final report by the end of this month. And some leading universities, including Waseda and Keio and others, agreed to join a consultative meeting to discuss how to proceed with this proposal. In any case, after the release of Todai's working group interim report, this issue has become a fairly big news item in recent months in Japan. It remains to be seen if this idea will be materialized when in my estimate that if a fair number of universities agree with the idea of shifting their academic calendar to September, the one starting in September, then the actual shifting will take place in about 4 or 5 years. But this, in any case, this indicates willingness to face challenges of internationalization of universities, and then as a whole, I think, based on this general good mutual perception, and then what I call cultural interpenetration, these attempts on the educational sphere appears to improve U.S. Japan human and cultural exchanges, and so it seems a future appears to be quite bright. With this, I would like to stop my remarks. I would like to ask first Secretary Hira to give his own remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair and Vice President Tanaka. I will give some remarks, and what I wanted to do, which you'll see playing as I'm talking. These are just photographs that reflect some of the work that we've done over the last 3 years in terms of our different interactions with, in the context of Japan-U.S. relations, activities associated here in the United States, associated with our travels to Japan, and in exchange, supporting exchange and information sharing programs, either via video conference or in person, both in Japan and in the United States. My remarks, what I wanted to first do is just set some context. The context is what's familiar to us all in terms of the context of our strategic relationship between the U.S. and Japan, but also the context in terms of the importance of cultural exchange with respect to preparing our youth with 21st century skills. And it's with that context we can talk about the implications for student exchange and teacher exchange and leadership training and development. But again, it's important to just re-emphasize that the U.S. Japan relationship is and has been the cornerstone of our involvement in the Pacific region. It is and has been the cornerstone of our involvement in the Pacific. But Japan has been more than just a strategic partner. Japan has been our extraordinary friend in many common endeavors, in peace and prosperity, in creating a better world. There's a mutual respect for our cultures, and we recognize the ability to learn from one another and to exchange ideas. And so I think it is very fitting in the context of Operation Tomodachi, that Tomodachi is in fact the name of this joint seminar. There's a history of us being there for each other. Some of you may know that when President Obama first took office, the first international visitor to visit him at the White House was the Prime Minister from Japan. Some of you may also know that the first trip that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton took was to Japan. We know on September 11th, one of the first to reach out was Japan, offering assistant and first responder support as we were facing our crisis. And we know a year ago, on March 11th, that our two governments sponsored and undertook the largest joint military operation for humanitarian purposes in our history, under Operation Tomodachi. And it's something that is relevant and touches us in the area of education, because in that, you probably know that we talk about the JET program. We lost 2 JET students, right, during that time. Taylor Anderson from the Virginia area and Monty Dickinson from Alaska. These were students that were dedicated personally to their own exchange, dedicated personally to building skills and language skills in Japan, but also to trying to make a world a better place. And so I think that's an important context for us when we think about cultural exchange. It's real. It's based on a strategic context, but it's got a very personal dimension to it. And so, as we reflect 1 year later, there's a long way to go, right? And you heard the ambassador make that we need to be friends, not just for the short term, but to rededicate ourselves to our friendship and our commitment as we recover over a longer period of time. But I think it's also clear that when you look at the devastation and the sadness associated with that travesty, that the resilience of the Japanese people, combined with the friendship from the U.S., but not only the U.S., from countries all around the world, that it really does serve as an example of what collaboration can do, right, when we actually put that first and foremost. And I think it tells us that building upon a long history of cultural exchange, that's really what can form the basis of that collaboration. It's built on a foundation. And I say that with some, candidly, for me personally, I was fortunate earlier in my student career and then in my professional career to have a personal relationship with Japan. Having spent time studying and working in Kyoto in the early 1990s, it was a special place for me. It has always remained a special place in my heart, and it was the beginning of a lifelong relationship. And it's one that I'm happy to say has been passed on to my son, who studying at Georgetown is also studying in the context of international relations, Japanese, and is looking to himself further his understanding and cultural experience in Japan. And so, as we think then about, well, in that strategic context that it relates to us personally in different ways, if I now put my professional Minister of Education role, if I adopt that role, it's very clear that both of our countries, we must dedicate ourselves so that we invest in our youth and ensure that they are prepared to be global citizens, that they have both the knowledge, the skills, and the perspective, the global perspective, that frankly that are in fact needed today and will be increasingly needed if they're going to contribute to our social, economic, and sustainable development in the 21st century. And so, again, with that context, this notion of student and teacher exchange has never been more important. The notion of leadership training and development has never been more important. And a robust cultural exchange has never been more important. We all know we live in an interconnected and competitive global economy, and that education is a key enabler of what's going to build the skills that our youth need. We can look out, and you heard the ambassador say, buy our products, visit us. But as we look out, we know that there's an ever-increasing array of products that come from different countries that are delivered through a very diverse supply chain. And we are benefiting from this borderless nature of innovation, manufacturing, and research and development. And so with that, our citizens are going to need to be better educated and better trained to meet these changing needs, because it's not static. According to the Committee for Economic Development, in a report entitled Education for Global Leadership, and I quote, "Full participation in this new global economy will require not just competency in reading, mathematics, and science, but also proficiency in foreign languages and deeper knowledge of other countries and cultures." So a complete education in the 21st century must teach our children about our interdependent world, and it must prepare them to be good leaders and good citizens. And so that's why, in my role, my first trip to the region was to Japan, because I wanted to learn to what degree do we share these common challenges as we think about our education systems, so we could discuss better how we could collaborate, how we could learn from one another. And what were some of the things that we talked about, we learned, that we continue to problem solve? We've talked a lot already about student exchange, and you've heard the statistics cited. First, in terms of Japanese students studying abroad, while it was at its peak in the late 1990s at almost 50,000, it's less than half that today. And I think that was presented this morning. There's a whole host of reasons associated with that. So that likely means the solution itself is not going to be a simplistic one that's going to change it overnight. But it's something that should concern us. It should concern us. In a world that's increasingly flat, we need to ensure that our students both understand, value, and engage in an international experience. From the U.S., the number is increasing, but the reality is, as you've heard, it's about 1/6 of students from Japan studying in the U.S., the number of U.S. students studying in Japan. So again, while the trend is somewhat increasing, it's at a base that's insufficient, given our scale and given the importance. So the question is, what can we do, and what are we doing to better promote that? I think there are a number of different things, and I'm going to echo some of what's been said before, but with my own additions. I do think a critical part is fostering language development earlier. I think that's especially true in the U.S. It's especially true in the U.S. We need to foster more Japanese language programs earlier in a student's experience, right? Meaning in elementary education, so they can feel more comfortable and have more of a skill base to communicate and be more likely to participate in abroad programs. I think second, and we've talked about some of the structural issues in terms of the differences in the school calendar. I think those are real structural issues. And I'm encouraged by the discussions and deliberations that are underway that may change that. But the reality is, in today's world, while those differences exist, I think the notion of having a diversity of programs that sometimes are shorter and more flexible is a great way to seed exchanges and to build the interest and appetite for people who may not be well positioned to take a full academic year or to commit to a full degree program overseas. And so frankly, I'm encouraged to the degree that the numbers for shorter programs are increasing, right? And if they're making up, I think that's not a bad change in the mix. because I think it's more likely to capture the interest of more students. I think we need to continue to promote the importance of exchange in the context of the skills that are needed. I think all too often, in terms of the U.S. education system as an example, people have not fully appreciated, both students but also parents in many communities, the value of education specifically and the role it plays in our economic reality today. For example, if you have a college degree, you are less likely to be unemployed by a factor of 2 to 3 times. Your wages will be significantly higher. The impact on your family, your children are more likely to complete college, versus the opposite of true. If you don't have a college degree, they're more likely to drop out. And so that is the economic reality that we live in. It's the importance of education and the need to have high education. Similarly, the importance of having a set of global skills is increasingly important in the world we live in. And we need to enable more students and parents and communities to understand that, so they see it less as a novelty and an adventure and more of a core part of what having 21st century skills really means. I think with that, I think we can do a better job at targeting the sets of students that may in fact thrive in these kinds of programs. Again, some of you may be familiar with some interesting research that for U.S. students found that oftentimes minority students actually do well in international exchange programs. Will have the likelihood that 1, they will improve their academic performance, and 2, their persistence here, the likelihood that they will complete the degree goes up significantly. And so that's in an environment where, again, in the U.S., to put it in context, half of our students who attend a traditional baccalaureate program or participate in a baccalaureate, half of them don't graduate in 6 years. Right? Half of them don't graduate in 6 years. So at a time when we need to not just increase the number of students who are getting a college degree, but doing so in such a way, doing it faster, we're actually seeing the role of international and study abroad programs for undergraduates can play a critical role. And you say, well, why might that be? Well, one of the things we're finding is, for minority students, even in the U.S., they are developing a set of skills to relate to different cultures. And so that's a same skill set that they can apply in an international program that seems less foreign. So there's a certain aptitude that they seem to have developed that in these programs they can thrive. And so again, as we look to increase the number of students abroad, all too often we think about that in a mainstream environment, and we should, again, continue to challenge our thinking and think about not only to increase it in the whole, but are there in fact select student populations that may actually be more amenable and more proficient in these kinds of programs. I think we also need to think about and promote Japan and the relationship we have with Japan on a bilateral basis, but also Japan's strategic relationship in the region. That as we think about the overall economic growth of the region, be it China, Indonesia, India, Japan is not only a strong economy as a singular nation, but their strategic role in the region makes it an important destination. And so again, having our students better understand that so they have a holistic view of the value of this kind of program. And then also something that the ambassador touched on, I think it's important that employers understand the quality and value of degrees outside the U.S. It's a particular problem. Many U.S. employers don't understand, don't know what Todai, Kyodai, Wafada, Keio, they're not familiar, personally not familiar, have some impressions, but how do we in fact, our employers better understand the high quality education, and create some brand familiarity, such as students participating in these programs, they see those as valuable assets. Because again, student populations can be quite rational, which is that's rewarded in a labor marketplace that will create an incentive that will in fact stimulate more demand. I guess the last thing I wanted to highlight in that regard, which is, again, the ambassador said we are operating in an environment that in terms of public resources and investment, but our budgets are constrained, right? We're operating in an environment where, while it would be great to increase by 10, 20, 50% the investments we can make in language programs, study abroad programs, the reality is that many of those programs are challenged to finance. And so I do think we need to be very creative in thinking about what are the pools of resources that can be used for multiple purposes. The classic example that I would call out are our STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, research-related programs, right? We are still very much committed to research. Increasingly, research, right, has been and will continue to need to be very much borderless. And so how do we think about our research collaborations in such a way that we're creating an incentive, an encouragement to reach out and making sure they can also serve as opportunities for extended study abroad. Because again, it's an efficient way to create and to diversify the cost of these programs. So that's from a student perspective, if you will. I think the other area that we see is continuing to be rich and ripe for further investment is in the area of teacher exchange. Not just teacher exchange, but learning itself from our educational system. So you've heard about JET, the JET program. In the context, there's been more than 35,000 people who have participated in some kind of teacher exchange program, be it Fulbright, JET, or I should say exchange program, including our teacher exchange program. But right now, as we look at what we need to do, and frankly, what many countries are looking to do to improve their education systems, they're looking and examining and benchmarking different systems all around the world. And Japan, as you may know, is renowned for their lesson study planning processes. It's something that many countries, including the U.S., have identified. And it's a process, for those of you who may not be familiar, where teachers, in a more collaborative way, jointly plan and observe and analyze their classroom's lessons, these research lessons. With these, that's an important practice that, in the U.S., many of our teachers, we recognize that if we're going to improve the quality of education, we're in fact going to have to improve the quality of teaching in the classroom. And so we're looking at what are some of these best practices around the world. And Japan is a great partner in kind of identifying that and partnering with us as we look to share that. We formed a new significant initiative called Respect, recognizing educational success, professional excellence, and collaborative teaching. And one of the core aspects of this is this notion of lesson study, right? Directly informed by our collaboration with Japan. And in just a couple of weeks, we'll be hosting the second International Summit on the Teaching Profession. In Japan, in fact, the Vice Minister will be there, in fact, leading, as a discussion starter, leading the discussion. And so the point I'm making is, we've got student exchange, we've got teacher exchange, but we also have the ability to provide cultural exchange, right, in a more fundamental way in terms of thinking about the education system itself. And I think as ministers of education, as officials from the ministers, I think we have to look again creatively about all the different ways we can collaborate and get strategic value from our relationship. And there are many other programs. I won't continue with the long list of programs like the U.S. State Department's International Visitors Leadership Program, which is a very prominent program. It's tried and true, and it's got a long history. There have been several prime ministers who participated in the program prior to being prime minister. The first female minister of defense in Japan. And so we need to continue to be mindful of and kind of promote these kinds of programs, because leadership and the ability to promote culture, teacher, and leadership development, it really does require sustained leadership. So I guess in closing, I have to say, I think it's poignant. We're at a poignant time in that, yes, it's the 1-year anniversary of March 11th, 2011. It's also the centennial, the celebration of the cherry trees to DC by the mayor of Tokyo. I think the cherry trees and that gift, that does represent kind of a living reminder of our friendship. I think we must use this as an opportunity to dedicate ourselves to finding sustainable solutions to our economic, environmental, and educational problems. And I think it's going to require an unprecedented level of international cooperation. But I also think that our alliance, our partnership, and our friendship is going to be what's going to be key to help us find these answers. They're going to benefit not only our respective countries, but I think it will continue to provide an example for the rest of the world. Thank you.
So thank you, Secretary Miller, for your very comprehensive remarks. And now I would like to ask Mr. Fonte his remarks.
Thank you very much, Tanaka-sensei, and thank you for the important work which USJI is doing here in the United States on these important topics. If I may, I'd like to start by recognizing and thanking Secretary Miller for his important contributions to the promotion of exchanges between Japan and the United States. As he has just said in his remarks, he himself is the result of an exchange with Japan, and I see no greater testimony to the value and importance of such exchanges than the work that he has done at the Department of Education in promoting further activities, innovative activities between Japan and the United States. Thank you, Secretary. It's, I think, another anniversary that's worth talking about. It was mentioned by Tanaka-sensei earlier, and that is the creation and the first meeting of the U.S. Japan Conference on Cultural and Educational Interchange. It's quite a mouthful, so it goes under the name of CULCON. What is that history? In 1961, President Kennedy made a visit to Japan. He met with Prime Minister Ikeda. It came in the aftermath of the difficult passage in Japan of the U.S. Japan Security Treaty. The ambassador at that time, Reischauer of Harvard, had a very strong belief that if the broken dialogue, what he called the relationship between Japan and the United States after the war, if the broken dialogue were to become unbroken, security treaties were important, economic ties were essential, political ties, of course, of great importance. But he strongly believed that only through people-to-people exchanges, particularly focused on education and culture, could the two nations come to understand each other, appreciate each other, and become true allies and friends. And so he proposed this concept of this joint bilateral public and private advisory panel of the two countries to Kennedy, who proposed it to Ikeda in 1961, and it was immediately agreed, and its first meeting took place in 2012, the 50th anniversary of which we celebrate now. That concept of 50 years ago is as strong and as important today as it was then. We can see the benefits of it when we look at the results, for example, of what happened in the aftermath of the great tragedy in Tohoku, the first nation to respond with all of its resources. And not just the resources of the United States military and economic resources and relief resources, but also the enormous outpouring of friendship and support of the American people to the Japanese. This is not an accident. It happens through the work that takes place day after day, year after year. It's why we're here today. And I think, therefore, it's very useful to think about how we update that, how we move that forward. In the CULCON, we have representatives that are from academia, from business. We also have representatives on the U.S. side from the Department of Education and the State Department. And the purpose of the CULCON is to have a senior high-level dialogue between the two countries with regard to how to promote educational and cultural exchanges. In more recent years, that has been focused on how we can improve, how we can develop, or identifying problems that need to be fixed. In the early 1990s, the issue of U.S. students studying in Japan was identified. And work was then, it was identified through the CULCON panel, and work was then done to understand why there were not more students going from the United States to Japan, and then how to fix that problem. I think it's an interesting case study because what was identified were two major issues. First, an issue of expense. It is expensive for American students to go to Japan, which is not, we must admit, a low-cost country in many respects. But also, there was not, at that time, many programs outside of Japanese language programs for those college students who were really specialized in Japan. There were not really many programs outside of that for American college students to attend. And so an effort was undertaken to create English language programs, a number of which exist, and as Tanaka-sensei has mentioned, many of which are at leading universities such as Todai. As a result, we started in the late 1990s a charitable entity, a 501c3 in American terms, the U.S. Japan Bridging Foundation, to raise money for scholarships to send American college students to Japan. Since the inception of that program, there have been over 1,000 students sent. And more important than that, it demonstrated across campuses all over America that it was indeed possible to go to Japan. And as a result, it has served as an impetus for more students to go. If we look at the program today, we are more or less able to raise money for approximately 100 students per year. But what's even more important and interesting is that we have demand from over 6 times that many students. If we could raise more money, we could send many more students to Japan for a semester or a full year. It's a good example of how Japan and the United States have worked together, identifying an issue, understanding its causes, coming up with solutions, and then executing in that solution, and I would say importantly, in the American context, doing that in a public sector, a government and private sector partnership that works very effectively to the benefit of individual students. There's now the issue of Japanese students to the US, and this has been on the agenda of the Kolkan now for the last several years. And indeed, this year is what we call a plenary year. Every 2 years, the US and Japan panels meet together. This year it will be in Tokyo in April to discuss issues of importance. And one of the important topics that we'll discuss is this issue of Japanese students in the United States. I think one of the things that comes from the discussion today from the ambassador, from Tanaka-sensei and Secretary Miller, is that we need to spend some time studying more exactly what's going on with the numbers. And I would echo Secretary Miller in saying that I think short-term exchanges are extremely valuable. They're a way of getting started. They're a way of learning about the experience. They can be very powerful to then result in subsequent experiences. And even if they're just a short-term experience, I think that they can still have a very important impact on an individual student's experience. But I think that's one of the things that perhaps we need to study more. What are the statistics? How much is longer term, short term? And what are the impacts? I think this would be a very valuable area for the Kolkan to support in terms of study and to get various groups to be involved. I would certainly like to add my applause to the at least the recommendation, if not yet the decision, to move forward with reforming the academic calendar. And all I can do is urge Tanaka-sensei to make that decision a positive one and to move that forward. I think it'll open up enormous possibilities. In particular, by reforming the calendar, in my view, it opens up particularly that summer period for Japanese students to come to the United States, where I think there will be a very positive response on the part of universities and colleges to receive students, particularly in the area identified by the ambassador of English language study, which could be very valuable. These could be short-term programs, as little as 2 weeks, perhaps as much as 4, 6, or even 8 weeks, but could be extremely valuable. I think the prioritization of foreign language study and the related experiences overseas, I think, are another important area. And finally, related to Japanese students coming to the United States, I think reforming and rendering more flexible the recruitment process, including making it actually a positive thing from the perspective of employers to have students who have those overseas experiences would be extremely important. Ambassador Fujisaki, I think, made a very important point, which I think is quite right. I as the father of now 3 young adults, can certainly attest to this. You know, students need to see the benefit in what they are asked to do or what they seek to do. I think if it is made more clear that there is a benefit for the study of foreign languages, particularly English, a benefit in having an overseas experience, reflected in the fact that employers would see that as positive, and I'd say vice versa for American employers looking at American students who've studied in Japan, I think that this can have a very important impact. I've worked for most of the last 30 years in Japan, so I've seen the challenging economic experience. I think another aspect of the issue, and I think this also deserves further study, is that we have had a difficult economic situation in Japan now over an extended period. And of course that has had an impact on the psyches of students. And of course I think it makes them somewhat more conservative in their choices. But there is no doubt that we live in an ever more interconnected world. In that context, international experiences, foreign language expertise, the ability to operate in different cultures, the ability to ask the right questions when one faces a new experience. All of these things are essential to success. And so we need to be able to demonstrate the importance of that and the benefit that can be achieved through exchanges that can then enhance the opportunities that students can receive. And so I think that there are a wide number of areas in which we can still do more work. And I've focused a little bit of my remarks on that of the student exchanges, and particularly Japanese students coming to America. If there's one other aspect that I would sort of put on the agenda, trying to push it out a little bit further, more broadly in exchanges, I think it touches upon young people, but I think it actually goes across generations, and is a topic that we are beginning to discuss in the Colcon dialogue. It is that of exchanges in civil society. One of the things I find very striking about what has happened in the aftermath of the great disaster in Tohoku is the outpouring of activity on the part of Japanese and foreigners in Japan in terms of service, seeking to help, seeking to volunteer. Yes, there's been some of that, but this is really, I think, at a much greater level. And universities such as Todai, as Waseda, and others have seen their students respond to this and seek activity. But it's still a relatively new phenomenon. And one of the things that one can observe in Tohoku is that it has been a little bit difficult in terms of implementation, how to go about it, how it should be organized, how it gets funded. And there, I think America has a great deal to offer in terms of experience, in terms of knowledge, in terms of organization. There's, I think, a wonderful opportunity for sharing between the two countries in this area, and interestingly, an opportunity to bring a new set of participants from the U.S. side, those who have been actively involved in nonprofits, in civil society, in volunteering organizations, to bring their knowledge, their expertise, their experience to Japan in a way in which there has perhaps never really been the opportunity to do so in the past. This could open a vast area of opportunity for exchange at the level of young people, as young as high school, certainly university, but also to those who are running important organizations that are involved in this kind of work. So I throw that to the audience as a kind of new idea, stretching a little bit beyond perhaps the topic that we've been discussing this afternoon, but one that I certainly would invite further comment. So with that, I'll end my remarks. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Miller, for your very insightful comments. And I think the remarks by both Secretary Miller and Mr. Poltis have given us a lot of materials to discuss and digest. And after listening to two of the remarks, I'd like to raise a few issues with both gentlemen. As to Mr. Miller's remarks, I'm quite struck with his emphasis on the sort of creative idea, given the sort of financial constraints. And then he stressed the importance of sort of research-connected exchanges. I believe that this is one area to explore, particularly in areas of science and engineering people. I think in terms of Japan-US relations, we rightly emphasize the importance of Japanese studies or American studies, but then to broaden the exchanges, we need to have exchanges among those who are specialized in non-Japanese specialization, non-American specialization, science and technology and engineering. So I wonder if you could have some concrete ways to conduct the research-related exchanges. Incidentally, many of the students that University of Tokyo fund for the short-term stay very much connected with research. They go to labs of the professors, the Todai professors had a long acquaintance with. And then, so I think this type of shorter visit appears to be very fruitful educationally. So I wonder if you could give some comments on that. And then I'm very much in agreement with the necessity of short-term stay. And then now there are, in addition to purely educational activities of language education or specialized curricula, I think some of us in Japanese universities have shown increasing interest in what might be called internship. And then I wonder if Mr. Poltis might give us some comments about the willingness of or the readiness on the part of American business to accept Japanese students as interns for short term. They may pose some difficulties because again, the English language competence might create some difficulty, but in addition to normal summer programs, some 3-month experiences in companies in the United States might give students some wider scope of understanding of the society. So these are the two of the questions, but then in addition to responding to these questions, I wonder if two of you may add some more comments with each other. And so, Secretary Miller.
Sure. This notion of being creative around some of the research programs, what we've been undertaking here is, in our efforts to promote STEM, which is something many of us are, in terms of education ministries, are very much focused on. What we realized is across government, there is a very diverse stream of funding for STEM, of which, in some ways, there is a relatively small component of it in the U.S. Department of Education, because of our inability to directly influence curriculum. There is about $3 billion, for example, but if you look outside of the U.S. Department that is in NSF, that is STEM related and education related. And that number goes up when you include other government agencies. We've been working as a cross-government task force to think and profile that spend and say, are there ways, in fact, we can reorient some of those programs to drive a strategic agenda around STEM. It's in that context that I'm thinking very practically about what might be opportunities. The idea would be, as you think about what some of those strategic priorities would be, I could imagine that as you think about the criteria, that you could advantage programs or applicants who are explicitly recruiting students or a research agenda that takes into account students from Japan and that's got an international component to it, explicitly as part of the design. I think what that would do is not only allow research to get done, but allow us to provide funding and a real stimulus. You could also do even more creative things. That could be for the applicant, or it could be applicants themselves could be advantaged if they had a very attractive exchange programs. And so you get a direct benefit or an indirect benefit by, again, sending a signal that we really are trying to foster exchange and trying to provide incentives to do so. So that's the context that we're trying to do. I think our other part of our role can be one of facilitator and convener. And so to the degree that we can play that role with institutions of higher education, that gives us another opportunity to promote the agenda. So those would be the ideas for how we might make some progress on it. So let me stop there. I'll allow you to comment.
So on internships, it's a good question. It's a good idea. It's a complicated topic. I think if we're considering Japanese students coming to America for study and then an internship, one issue, and I don't feel qualified to opine, but then there are issues about visa and status that have to be considered. But having said that, I think that it can be a very valuable experience, and I would make this comment for consideration. I know of a number of American companies in Japan who have large businesses, successful businesses, and they would like to find ways to assist in the process of helping Japanese students to study overseas, particularly in America, since they're American companies. And in that context, I think would be quite open to the idea of internships. I think that the way this type of issue has to be addressed is to look at partnerships. It's to identify a concept, look at the underlying issues, as I've mentioned, that include not just English language capability, but issues such as visa, and proper status, and then go to a group of potential participants who would be willing to partner with a university to provide that experience. I think in particular, in areas of the sciences and engineering, that this is of great interest on the part of American companies that have important activities in Japan, and seek to find ways to give back and see this as a very valuable means of doing so.
I think related, but not the same, but it's got the role of the private sector. One thing that I've been hearing and talking to the business community in the U.S. is because their supply chains and their R&D organizations are increasingly global, what they're finding is that their managers and employees who are participating in these don't have the global skills. And so there's a real need in terms of continuing education programs to foster some of those skills. And so you're finding that, okay, now that I am fully employed, I need to increase my English language skills if I'm not a native English language speaker. If we're going to conduct business in English, but it's with my Japanese counterpart, I need cultural awareness and cultural language skills short of actually working in country. And so I think there's a role for education providers to play that role. It's not just kind of a training program, but there is a growing need And I think with that increasing kind of skill development and cultural sensitivity, as that's embedded more into the private sector, I think that will be more likely then for them to see the value then of seeding that earlier on in an internship program.
Well, thank you very much. Do you have any mutual questions or comments at this juncture? Well, if not, then I would like to ask the audience to raise a question. Yes, please. The back of the door. I think somebody. Would you
It'd probably be easier for everybody to hear.
Would you come over here to the microphone?
Should I state my name and affiliation?
Please.
Yes, my name is Reese Scott. I'm a recent graduate from Georgetown University. I don't know if I met your Mr. Secretary, but I wish him the best in his further studies. My question is actually for Mr. Porte. Yes. I think you made a very excellent point related to the capacity for exchange between the U.S. and Japan through civil society organizations and volunteerism. As someone who actually wrote his senior thesis on the topic of Japanese volunteerism and NGOs and how they've helped to progress democratization within Japan, I'd also like to point out there's actually also capacity, I think, for exchange not only between U.S. volunteers and Japanese within Japan and Tokyo. There's actually a capacity, I think, to bring Japanese here to the U.S. to volunteer here in several capacities, which I think would be very helpful. You see, I happen to have a professor friend in Japan who has a program here in D.C. where he brings his Japanese students to volunteer in soup kitchens and kindergartens, and so I was wondering if you felt that was something that could be further developed, and if you could also expand on any other thoughts you might have about volunteerism and the capacity for exchange there. Thank you.
So, thank you for that question, and certainly I did not say it explicitly, but implicitly, and now I will say explicitly, is that there can be two-way exchange, absolutely. And I think that is the best way to extract the most benefit from the opportunity. So I think that there is an opportunity for learning in both directions. As I say, this is something that's new, and it's kind of a new topic for the dialogue of exchanges between our two countries. And I think it has an enormous amount of potential, and it should operate in both ways. I'll give you an example, something that we are going to be featuring in April when we have the plenary of the COCON. One of the great, I think, creations of the last 2 decades in America in civil society, in contributing to the community, in volunteerism has been Teach for America. And we have helped to organize the visit of Wendy Kopp to Japan, the founder of Teach for America and Teach for All. We will be doing a seminar with her. We will be introducing her to a number of areas. We hope to get quite a bit of media attention. And there is an organization, a very nascent organization, just getting started, Teach for Japan, which is being assisted by Teach for America, and which we hope we're going to be able to encourage others to participate in. And in that context, it has all kinds of, I think, important positive implications for what we're talking about. First, there's a great American organization that is going to try to assist to create a similar organization, recognizing that there are differences. It's going to have to be adapted to the situation in Japan. And there's a young man who's leading this effort, a young Japanese who has been working on that. But there's that movement. There's then the opportunity to do something in the community in Japan. That's relatively new. But then they need all kinds of infrastructure to do that. They'll need funding. They'll need to create an organization. They have to develop training. They have to find great students coming out of Japanese universities. And we need to persuade employers that great students who come out of Japanese universities and go and do Teach for Japan for 2 years should then go and hire those great students after 2 years which is not the current norm in Japan. But let me tell you, if we can contribute to helping that happen, there are so many great things that will come out of it. And I think that's, would be one, I think, very positive first example of what we could be achieving, Japan and the U.S. In this whole area of voluntarism, nonprofits, and civil society development.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to.
Oh, yes, please.
Only thing I want to. No, the only thing I want to add is, I do think this the sector of education exchange and education services, I think, is a very rich sector for exchange. I think what we're finding is that in the U.S., our commitment and the need to accelerate and take to scale significant improvements in education, I think makes us very open. And I think our counterparts around the world have similar approaches, right? We each have different, similar challenges with different starting points, and I think it's just a very rich area for exchange. I mean, think, for example, there is, as successful as Teach for America is, right now they've had challenges, and they couldn't even place all the teachers, right? The applicant teachers, high quality teachers here, right? Prospective teachers who have a real interest and appetite to make a contribution, who, because of the current budget situations with public budgets being cut, were not employable. So they had to cut back. So they had significant growth, but couldn't place them. To the degree that those could be accessed, right, and could have participated in these programs in Japan, could be a vehicle by which, again, it's post-graduation, so it's not a student exchange, but it could be this notion of an internship program and a jet-like program in Japan that already is leveraging an infrastructure. So I think there's lots of these kinds of potential partnerships and opportunities that exist.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes, on the right-hand side. Would you please come over the microphone?
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick Arm at the U.S Japan Research Institute, actually, and thank you for your discussion. It's been very insightful. And just as we're talking about cultural exchange, I wanted to talk about, actually just ask a question, because I'm someone who's benefited from cultural exchange in Japan 3 times now. Went there in high school, I studied abroad there, I was on the JET program. And the whole reason why I got interested in Japan was because of a 6th grade Japanese class that I was fortunate enough to have. So, Secretary Miller, I wanted to ask you, what exactly is the Department of Education doing in terms of investment, in terms of providing secondary language courses in elementary school or below high school? Because I think that is very important if you want to broaden our exchange approach. And if you look at China right now, China's investing so much money in the United States to have cultural language programs in elementary school as well as in high school. And that's great, I think it's perfect. But if we want to improve our exchange with Japan, I think we need to take that approach as well, as how can we bring Japanese language studies to the classroom more in the United States. Thank you very much.
So I think it's important to understand kind of how education funding works in the U.S. and policymaking. And so that is the K-12 education system in the U.S. is roughly a $650 billion system. The federal government provides less than 10% of funding. Our historic funding, right, has been, our congressional, if you will, mandate and our funding has been on, the biggest programs have been on Title I, so these are formula programs for poor kids and to help fund students with disabilities. And that was born out of kind of the creation of the department. It was a recognition that there's substantial inequities and states and districts meeting the needs of poor kids, often minority kids, and students with disabilities. And so the role of the federal government has been, from a funding standpoint, to help provide equalization and additional resources to serve those historically neglected student populations. The vast majority of funding is at the state level, 50%, and then the balance is at the local level based on property taxes. In terms of education policy, the Department of Education, by statute, is prohibited from curriculum. We cannot, in fact, say you should have foreign language study in the 2nd grade. We are by law precluded from that. Policies in terms of standards, curriculum, teacher licensure, length of school day are all set at the state level and subject to implementation at the local level with collective bargaining agreements with labor at the local level. So, to answer this, with that as context, our ability to fund or to direct policy, we don't have that mechanism. What we do then use is our bully pulpit and talking about the importance of a well-rounded education, that despite we need having high standards in both language arts and science and math, that we actually, not at the expense of language and these other, comprehensive set of skills. And we also, where we can, we identify small pools of money that can be used to basically identify innovative programs, and so that we can promote specific language programs and try to hold those up as models, is really what we can do. That's what we're trying to do. And so it's very different than China, and then frankly, most of countries around the world who have a much more centralized education system that's very much thought about and incorporated into their economic development policy. That's just not our structure in the United States. So we're committed to doing that. We're looking at and talking about different strategies in terms of trying to promote that. And we're trying to use our convening and facilitation, especially with through the governors and through the chief state school officer organizations, so the key state administrative leaders, to talk about some of these innovative things and to familiarize those folks with what's going on around the world, so that they can better make those kinds of policy decisions.
I would just add that in addition to the COLCON, there is another organization, which is the Japan-United States Friendship Commission, of which I'm also the chairman. This has my private sector members of the COLCON, and it has 4 members of Congress who are board members. And over the years, we have, there is a certain amount of money that is in effect in a trust fund, the interest of which, from investing in U.S. Treasuries, which is the only thing we're allowed to invest in, only the best, is then allocated to various activities in education, culture, political exchanges, and grassroots exchanges. One of the important activities which we have funded is the Association of Teachers of Japanese, which is a nationwide activity. And we have been a core funder of that organization, which is based in Colorado. Among other things, we were one of those who funded the study and the ultimate creation of the advanced placement test in Japanese. And so it is certainly something that we see as a priority, and with the funds that we have, we do allocate some to that. I should also say that I think that the government of Japan has done an outstanding job in terms of promoting and developing language instruction. I would say they are far too modest in terms of trumpeting their own accomplishments in this regard, and the quality of Japanese teaching. There may not be enough of it across all of America, but where there is, the quality of Japanese language instruction in America is extremely high, due to these very strong efforts over many years on the part of the government of Japan.
I appreciate your, again, appreciation of the Japanese government efforts to promote Japanese language instruction in the United States. But still, I would rather press on to make further recommendations and others to the Japanese government and the Japanese private sector to do what? To further promote Japanese language education in the United States. It seems to me, as far as I know, the number of students interested in learning the Japanese language is on the rise.
Yes, it is.
And what should the Japanese government, including the Japan Foundation, and as well as the private sector in Japan, and then universities in Japan can do?
So I think that inevitably we get to that part of the conversation which is about funding, and I think that there I would say that the answer to your question, Tanaka-sensei, is that the private sector needs to make more effort, and I think that private-public partnerships need to be created. I have already indicated, for example, I've been to the Ministry of Education in Tokyo, and I've said, if you would like help in looking at models of funding, I've done a lot of fundraising. I'm prepared to do that. We have colleagues in the United States who have a lot of understanding about how to do that, and we'd be prepared to share our experience and knowledge to do that. I think that that is going to be a key issue. I think the other thing, though, which is in your comment, is that I think we have to be thinking a little bit more positively. Actually, interest in Japanese language study is on the rise. You know, 2 years ago, there were more students enrolled at Harvard at the undergraduate level studying Japanese than Chinese. Sounds impossible, but it's true. So actually, there's more interest than we lead ourselves to believe, and I think we have to simply be thinking more positively and then acting more aggressively.
I think the other thing, which we need to do in all of education, and I think it's true in language studies as well, is we've got to look at innovative approaches that leverage technology, because you can extend the reach of the programs that are offered and of the forms for conversational skill development by leveraging technology. And I think we just have to look increasingly towards those solutions unparalleled to the traditional language study programs.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Richard Lenoz. I'm a professor at American University, former Goldman Sachs, and formerly taught at Policymaking. And so I'm very encouraged by some of these things I'm hearing. Very exciting, but on the other hand, we're part of the global economy, and I saw some big trends underway in Japan, and I'm wondering how you address them. For one, a lot of the students getting out of universities are not getting jobs. And the ones who are getting jobs know Chinese or English. In particular, I saw a number of people who were Chinese who grew up in Japan who got jobs way before Japanese people did. And I don't know if people are yet feeling resentful, but I'm wondering what the trend would be with that. And related to this, I visited Morgan Stanley in Tokyo. I understand you ran that office for a while, and it's hollowing out. They're moving to Hong Kong. And so what are these prospects for internships and exchanges if they're not definitely going to lead to some type of economic opportunity?
Okay, so I'll take the second issue first. You know, I mean, Morgan Stanley has the Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi UFJ as its largest single shareholder at 22%. They have a joint venture in Japan, which, although they have forced some early retirement, probably necessary and a good thing, is actually actively recruiting younger people and will be growing their business. So I don't think that there's a hollowing out. Right now, you know, some of the strongest financial institutions in the banking sector actually happen to be Japanese. And I think, again, it's easy to engage in, you know, negative or pessimistic thinking. I think it's time to have a little bit more optimistic thinking. So I don't think it's over. Yes, you know, I think that there have been some things in the regulatory environment. This is not a panel discussion on financial services, so I won't go there. But I think that there's a lot more potential than is being given credit right now. As far as the job front, you know, we can't change what the nature of the economy is. But I think that in one of your comments, I think those students who have a broader set of experiences and skills have given themselves a better set of opportunities. Actually, I think in the more recent period, the job situation has actually improved overall for Japanese students. But again, I think it's a matter of, you know, the name of the game is going to be, I think, for Japan, if I can, you know, as someone who has raised 3 children in Japan and whose wife is Japanese, I think I have some right to say this. I think that the future for Japan among young people is going to be to create more globally minded, globally experienced young people who will be able to creatively take the enormous strengths that Japan has in any number of fields, you know, from science and engineering all the way to, you know, to the arts, and leverage that in a world which will be increasingly interdependent. That's what's required. I think that's what the leadership of of important universities are thinking about in Japan. And I think it requires, again, more optimistic, forward-looking thinking. And with that, I think a lot more can be achieved.
Yeah, the only thing I guess I would add is, because it goes back to a little bit of my context of, or comment about Japan's position in the region. To the degree that Japan's position in the region continues to evolve as a regional perspective, then you can imagine internships are not just internships in Japan, but to be internships in the region hosted based out of Japan, where you're bringing a set of language, English language skills, Japanese language skills, cultural sensitivity, and then you could still be kind of deploying those skills to the benefit of a firm in Indonesia, in Vietnam, and China. And so I think thinking about this in a kind of the growth of the region and in the role in that context that I think Japan clearly will play a long-term and strategic role. I think that's the context that I see it versus, I think historically many people think about a Japan-centric internship, just to live and work in Japan to the benefit of the Japanese local economy. I think it's thinking about it much more global because the reality is the economy is evolving that way.
Thank you very much. If I might add a few observations, I think yes, there is one big issue about employment for the overall Japanese graduates, but then at least in the last few years, particularly last year, I think there emerged a very big sort of surge of opinion among the business leaders about the necessity of global-minded students with global skills for the vigor or revival of the Japanese economy. I think they and in the past, we had the sense, and we had lots of complaints about the Japanese business from the viewpoint of universities, that Japanese business do not give much appreciation to international experiences of the students. And we argued that that was a part of the reason that the students are not particularly interested in going abroad. If the business does not give importance to international experience, what's the reason for students to stay 1 year, which was regarded by the business as a waste of time? So we made lots of complaints about the business, and then somehow, finally, over the last year or two, or so, there emerged a very strong sense that the Japanese business really are in need of students with global experiences. And it seems that this change was not the simple pretense, but based on some realization that the Japanese business are now, if they are to survive in global competition, they need those employees comfortable in working New York, Paris, but in addition, in Shanghai or Bangkok or even in Delhi. In order to, I think that's the sort of recognition I, as somebody from the university, greatly appreciate and hopefully to continue. Any other questions? Well, if not, I would like to ask two of the gentlemen to give us final remarks.
Well, again, one, I'm encouraged. I think, as I said, the need for cultural exchange, language exchange, has never been greater. I think the experience of the last year, the rededication, right, driven by a devastating event, but as I think just raised the profile of our relationship, and I think it's out of that tragedy could come kind of a new beginning and a kind of a rededication, and so I think that I find that very encouraging. And I actually think the forces at work kind of in the global economy will just increase the demand for it. And so I can just, again, share on behalf of this administration, on behalf of the Department of Education, our commitment to be critical partners in this and to do what we can to foster and accelerate these kinds of exchange.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fulton.
To echo Secretary Miller, the Obama administration has expressed a very strong commitment, and as you know, we've had more than one Japanese prime minister over the period of the Obama administration, but each and every one, regardless of political affiliation, has also reaffirmed that commitment to exchanges in education and culture. At the CULCON, our mission is to find, is not only to maintain this, but to find opportunities to strengthen it and to create new opportunities. You can take a look at our new website, which is quilcon.jusfc.gov. I have two of my colleagues here with me at this event. Please talk to them afterwards. It's our hope that we can use the experience, the knowledge, the network, and also we believe some of our convening power to find any number of opportunities among Japan-related organizations to further enhance this goal. It is a way, I think, to engage young people in what is, I think, one of the most important things that we can do to assure a prosperous and safe future for both our countries.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not attempting to summarize what we have discussed. I think most of the issues have been very clear and well pointed out. And so I simply would like to repeat what I said at the outset, that this conversation is a series of conversations that is going to be related to what CULCON and others are going to do in the future, with the U.S. Japan Higher Education Panel to be held on April the 9th in Tokyo, and then also the plenary meeting of the CULCON itself. And so I hope these conversations would be useful contribution to CULCON's further discussion. And we would appreciate very much if you could give us opinions as to these issues of human and cultural exchanges, either through the USJI Washington office or to a CULCON directory. I think your contribution will further enhance deliberation. Well, with this, I would like to close today's panel. Thank you very much.